Stars in a new motion picture entitled Find Me Guilty. It opens Friday. Please welcome Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel has played a lot of hardcore roles over the years, but somewhere along the line, he became the symbol of roaring engines and unbreakable family bonds.
I walked away from this life, but when family's in trouble, I don't hesitate.
His gravelly voice could make even the wildest lines sound legendary. Now, at 58, something about him feels different. The shine of Hollywood has dimmed, the roar of Fast and Furious has softened, and the man once defined by strength is revealing a more vulnerable side. This isn't a story of fading fame. It's about what happens when the man who lived life a quarter mile at a time finds the road catching up to him. The past few years have shown a new chapter for Vin Diesel, one that might break your heart. Not because he's fallen, but because he's finally letting the world see the man behind the legend. Join us as we take a look at the life of screen racing's biggest family man. Before he was Vin Diesel, the unstoppable force of Hollywood's most high-octane franchise, he was Mark Sinclair, a struggling New York kid raised by a single mother and an acting teacher stepfather who gave him his first introduction to performance. He was born on the 18th of July, 1967, in Alameda County, California, and raised in New York City. His story began far from the roaring engines and slick camera angles that would later define him. He was just a kid with a chipped shoulder, fierce determination, and a deep voice that would one day make him unforgettable. But at the time, all he had were rejections and dreams, too big for his circumstances. Mark grew up in an environment where creativity was a currency, not a luxury. His stepfather, Irving Vincent, worked as a theater manager and acting instructor, introducing young Mark to the stage. While that brought him into the work of acting, it wasn't glamour that hooked him, it was belonging. Acting, in many ways, gave him a sense of family before fame gave him one on screen. By the time he was a teenager, he was sneaking into downtown theaters, auditioning for plays, and hustling odd jobs to pay rent. It wasn't the story of overnight stardom. It was the story of a man who would have to build his destiny brick by brick. His mixed heritage, which was part Italian, part African American, and part everything in between, became one of the first challenges he faced in the industry. Hollywood didn't know where to place him. Casting directors wanted boxes, not enigmas, and he was too ambiguous for the roles being written in the late 80s and early 90s. He wasn't white enough for one part, nor black enough for another. This racial ambiguity would one day become his unique strength, but for the many years before, it was the very thing that kept him invisible. Frustrated but unbroken, he decided to create his own opportunity. In the mid-1990s, using money he'd saved from working as a bouncer in New York nightclubs, he wrote, directed, produced, and starred in a short film called Multifacial. The 20-minute project, which was shot in just a few days, became an honest reflection of his struggles as an actor of mixed race, navigating a system obsessed with labels. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 1995, earning attention for its raw honesty and his undeniable screen presence. It wasn't a success yet, but it was the first spark. That spark grew when Multifacial caught the attention of Steven Spielberg. At the time, Steven Spielberg was developing Saving Private Ryan, and he was so impressed by Vin's short film that he wrote a role for him in the movie, the character of Private Caparzo. It was a small part, but it changed everything. For the first time, his face appeared in a major Hollywood film, surrounded by cinematic legends. His gritty authenticity and gravitas, even in brief scenes, left a lasting impression. It was as if Hollywood suddenly realized what it had been overlooking. His career from that point on unfolded like a slow burn. His next breakthrough came in 2000 with Pitch Black, a low-budget sci-fi thriller that introduced audiences to Riddick, a morally ambiguous anti-hero whose quiet menace and physical dominance felt tailor-made for Vin. The film was a sleeper hit, proving that the bouncer from New York could carry a film on his shoulders. Riddick wasn't a man of many words, and that suited him perfectly. He didn't need to talk. He had a presence that spoke volumes. He could communicate entire emotions through silence and posture, and that became his cinematic language. By the turn of the millennium, Vin Diesel had done what few outsiders had managed. He had made Hollywood take him seriously. He wasn't groomed by the studio system or backed by a famous lineage. He built himself from rejection, from grit, from the nights he stood outside clubs guarding doors instead of walking through them. The irony, of course, was that the same system that once couldn't define him would soon rely on his image to sell billions in box office revenue. Yet even then, he never carried himself like a conventional celebrity. His friends and colleagues often described him as introspective, philosophical even. Behind the muscles and the deep voice, there was a man who read poetry, who studied mythology, who believed in loyalty almost to a fault. This duality between the thinker and the fighter in him became the foundation of the characters he would later play. When The Fast and the Furious came knocking in 2001, he didn't just see a movie about cars. He saw something deeper, a story about family, code, and belonging. Dominic Toretto wasn't just another action hero. He was a reflection of Vin's own life. Like Dominic, he was a man who built his own tribe when the world refused him one. He turned the idea of brotherhood into a cinematic religion, one that audiences around the world connected to on an emotional level. By the time the world knew his name, Vin Diesel had already spent years fighting for it. The fame that followed wasn't luck, but the hard-earned result of relentless work, countless rejections, and a personal belief that no one else could define who he was meant to be. The man we now associate with roaring engines and loyalty above all didn't start as a superstar. He started as a kid who refused to quit, a reluctant star who found power not in being seen, but in finally being understood. The thing no one saw coming, though, was that he didn't just find acceptance. He became the trigger for a frenzy. The rise of a franchise icon. When The Fast and the Furious hit theaters in 2001, and no one, not even Universal Pictures, expected it to redefine action cinema for the next 2 decades. The film, loosely inspired by a magazine article about underground street racing, was supposed to be a modest summer thriller. Instead, it became the ignition point for a billion-dollar saga, and at its center stood a man named Dominic Toretto, a character who would forever fuse with the real-life persona of Vin Diesel. In that first film, there was something magnetic about him. He wasn't just a gearhead or a criminal. He was a man of code, loyalty, and quiet strength. He lived by rules most people forgot, a modern outlaw with a heart full of loyalty and a deep disdain for betrayal. He brought an authenticity to that role that couldn't be faked. The grit in his voice, the solemn weight behind every look, they all came from somewhere real. You could sense that this wasn't acting for him. It was a confession. The movie's success was explosive. Audiences connected with the adrenaline, the cars, the races, the heists, but they also connected with the idea of family. Dominic Toretto's now iconic line, "I don't have friends, I got family," became a cultural mantra, one that transcended screens and memes. For Vin Diesel, family wasn't just a line, it was a mission statement. It became his entire brand, both on and off screen. In the early 2000s, he was suddenly everywhere. After The Fast and the Furious came XXX in 2002, The Chronicles of Riddick in 2004, and other action-heavy projects. He was being compared to the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, action icons that defined the earlier generations. Where they leaned on bravado and machismo, he brought something quieter, more philosophical. He wasn't just flexing his muscles, he was building a mythology. Yet, just as quickly as he ascended, he made the unexpected move of walking away. He declined to appear in Too Fast, Too Furious, a decision that shocked fans and puzzled studios. The reason, as he's hinted over the years, was creative control. He didn't want to play a caricature of Dominic Toretto, but wanted to protect the soul of the story. To him, the first film wasn't about cars or cops, it was about honor, code, and brotherhood. When he felt that essence slipping away, he stepped aside. That decision was risky, and for a while, it seemed like Diesel might have overplayed his hand. While Too Fast, Too Furious found success without him, his other projects struggled to reach the same heights. Hollywood's memory is short, and soon there were whispers that his star might have burned too fast, but he wasn't done. Behind the scenes, he was learning, producing, and quietly shaping his own cinematic empire. In 2009, after years of speculation, he returned to the driver's seat in Fast and Furious for the fourth installment that reunited the original cast. The reunion wasn't just fan service, it was redemption. The franchise roared back to life, reinventing itself from street racing drama to global heist thriller, and he was again its emotional anchor. From that point on, Fast and Furious became more than a movie series. It became a family saga that stretched across generations and continents. As both star and producer, he helped steer the franchise into blockbuster territory. Fast 5 in 2011 was the turning point, merging over-the-top action with heartfelt storytelling and introducing Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, a casting choice that would change the dynamic on and off screen. The duo was like lightning in a bottle, a volatile mix of charisma, ego, and muscle, pushing each other to new limits. Their chemistry, both collaborative and competitive, made the movies even more electric. Off-camera, Diesel began treating the cast and crew like kin. He famously referred to Paul Walker as his brother, Jordana Brewster as his sister, and even named his daughter Pauline after Paul's tragic passing. To him, the Fast and Furious set wasn't a workplace, it was home. As the franchise grew, so did expectations. He wasn't just an actor anymore, he was the face, the heartbeat, the one responsible for holding it all together. Every film meant higher stakes, more spectacle, and more pressure. And while he handled it with the stoic, calm fans admired, those close to him often noticed the toll it took. He wasn't 20 anymore, and behind the confident smile was a man increasingly aware of time's ticking clock. For Vin Diesel, the Fast and the Furious was never about speed. It was about connection. It was about a man who'd once struggled to find a place in Hollywood, creating a world where everyone belonged, no matter their background. Now, as time catches up, as it inevitably does, the man who once thrived on momentum has started to slow down. And this is a quiet turning point. The quiet transformation and legacy. There's a certain flavor to Vin Diesel now that didn't exist before. You can see it in interviews, in photographs, even in the quiet way he carries himself when he steps onto a red carpet. The man who once defined Hollywood's loudest franchise has learned the value of silence. At 58, Vin isn't chasing the spotlight as much as before, he's now learning to live comfortably outside of it. For a long time, his life was built on motion. From the roar of engines to the pressure of production schedules, everything in his world was about acceleration. Bigger stunts, higher stakes, louder applause, but somewhere between grief, age, and perspective, He discovered something he had been speeding past for years, and that was peace. He has spoken candidly about how becoming a father reshaped everything. The man who once played larger-than-life heroes now measures his success in smaller, quieter victories found in bedtime stories, family dinners, and the way his kids look at him when he's just dad and not Dominic Toretto. Those moments, he said, remind him of what Paul Walker often told him during their years together, that there's life beyond the set and meaning beyond fame. Vin still works, but on his own terms. His focus has turned toward producing and storytelling rather than chasing roles. He's developed projects through his company, One Race Films, that highlight diversity and human connection, the very things that once made him feel unseen in Hollywood. For him, it's not about proving anything anymore. It's about leaving something meaningful behind. Yet, there's a poetic irony in how he's aged. The man whose film persona was built on strength and endurance now embodies something far more enduring, and that's vulnerability. He doesn't hide the creases in his face or the weight of time. When he speaks, there's a measured calm, a tone that suggests he's lived through enough to understand that nothing lasts forever. Not fame, not fear, not even pain. Fans have noticed it too. The internet is full of side-by-side photos of Vin Diesel from the early 2000s to now, often captioned with disbelief or nostalgia. The muscular hero has softened with age, both in appearance and demeanor. Interestingly, what some mistake for decline is actually a new and inevitable transformation. He's not trying to do the impossible act of outpacing time, but instead working with it and fittingly shaping his actions. His social media presence reflects that change. Instead of the heavily curated glamour posts common in celebrity culture, Vin often shares emotional reflections, gratitude messages, and glimpses into his family life. He posts tributes to fans, memories of Paul Walker, and quiet meditations on loyalty and kindness. It's not performance, he says, it's legacy work, a man documenting the lessons he's learned rather than the trophies he's earned. Behind all of this is a growing awareness that the road ahead is shorter than the one behind. He has said that he's more interested now in what stories he leaves behind than how many blockbusters bear his name. He's mentoring younger actors, emphasizing humility and discipline. He's also taken a more spiritual view of success, one that doesn't depend on box office numbers, but on impact. He once said, "You can build an empire, but if you don't build people, it crumbles when you're gone." Hollywood, of course, is a machine that rarely slows down. Franchises evolve, faces change, and the industry keeps racing forward. But Vin Diesel's evolution feels almost like a counterweight to that momentum. While others chase reinvention, he's embracing authenticity. The muscles and engines may have defined him once, but today it's the thoughtful, weathered, and reflective man underneath that people connect with most. He's even spoken about mortality in ways that feel startlingly open for a man once synonymous with indestructibility. In a 2022 interview, when asked how he'd like to be remembered, he paused, then smiled faintly. "For the love I gave. For the people I never stopped showing up for." It wasn't the kind of answer you'd expect from an action star, but that's exactly the point. The years have made him more human, not less heroic. When he talks about loyalty now, it's not just a theme for movies, it's a philosophy of living. When he says family, it's not a tagline, it's a firm belief. The loss, the fame, the success, and the weight of time have all converged into something deeper, a seasoned type of wisdom. At 58, he is no longer the man racing toward destiny. He's the man who's learned to look in the rearview mirror and smile at how far he's come. There's humility in that, a kind of quiet gratitude that only comes after decades of running full throttle and realizing that the real prize was never at the finish line, it was in the people, the memories, and the lessons gathered along the way. So when fans ask, "What happened to Vin Diesel?" the answer isn't something tragic. It's simply life's new rhythm. The fast cars have slowed, the spotlight has dimmed, but the man has grown deeper, gentler, more grounded. The hero who once lived a quarter mile at a time has finally found peace in the stillness between the miles. And in that stillness, he's discovered what might be his greatest role yet. Not the action star, not the legend, but simply the man who made it through. A father who still values loyalty, family, and is still grateful and full of love. What do you think of Vin Diesel's transformation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.